You see, always in everything that they did, hovering in the background, was the wish, the desire for the ages-old dream of the utopian world order. The end of war, the crashing down of national boundaries, and the coming together of all humanity. Behind a great undertaking such as that used by the pharaohs in the building of the great temples of initiation known today as the pyramids. Another great social engineering project. By 1952, Berkner's suggestion was being studied by the International Council of Scientific Unions. He continued to urge the world scientific community to broaden the purview of the project to include the study of the properties of the ionosphere through the use of both satellites and sounding rockets. For this reason, he suggested 1957 as the best year for the IGY, or International Geophysical Year, since, according to the astronomers, sunspot activity would be at its peak. The reaction of countries, organizations, and scientific communities brought into being one of the first important transnational cooperative efforts since the establishment of the United Nations. In October 1954, the ICSU formally agreed to hold the International Geophysical Year from 1st July 1957 through the 31st of December 1958 in order to observe the entire period of maximum sunspot activity. A series of world data centers was established with collection of complete data in the United States and, hear this, the Soviet Union, and sub-centers in 8 other countries. 66 countries, 20,000 to 40,000 scientists, and tens of thousands of volunteer observers finally participated, transcending the barriers of the Cold War in an act of unprecedented cooperation between the United States, the Soviet Union, Great Britain, and 57 other nations of the world. It was unbelievable. It was Berkner who drew up the proposal for United States participation in the IGY in 1954, and through Alan Waterman, director of the National Science Foundation, presented it to President Eisenhower in March 1955. Naturally, the question of possible interference with military efforts was raised almost immediately. What if the civilian effort set off a rocket that was confused for an international continental ballistic missile, or an intercontinental ballistic missile, as it should rightfully be termed? But when Eisenhower turned to his defense advisors for guidance, they indicated that such a program need not delay important military programs. So Eisenhower gave his full support, including the go-ahead for civilian development of a satellite as part of the United States contribution. And this set the stage for 2 important initial realities of the space age. First, the American space effort would be organized under civilian authority. Careful attention was given to the coordination of the American announcement concerning the nature of its commitment. Despite concern over the possibility that deliberation might cause a delay that would allow the Russians to announce their program first and gain a propaganda advantage, the decision nevertheless was made to arrange for a simultaneous release of the satellite announcement by the International Geophysical Year Secretariat in Brussels and the White House concurrently in Washington on 29 July 1955. And second, ladies and gentlemen, as might be expected in our paradoxical world, the shock of Sputnik would once again heighten the interest and participation of the military, the security apparatus, and astronautics, bringing renewed emphasis even within the nominally civilian American program, to the importance of the single combat warrior, the astronaut. And many of you listening, as well as I, lay down in our backyards and watched breathlessly to spot this first space traveler launched by the Soviet Union called Sputnik. And we were so excited when we saw it. And no matter what our age was, our next science project was a rocket. Although President Eisenhower may have initially believed those who professed the military inapplicability of space technology as the 1950s wore on, he became more fearful that space activities might extend aggressive militarism beyond the surface of the Earth. Eisenhower had been a direct witness to the grotesque nature and wastefulness of modern warfare. He had a keen appreciation of the risks associated with the institutional momentum of the military-industrial complex, and when he left office, he warned us of the possible future problems that it could foist upon us. In his farewell address, Eisenhower said, quote, "The people of the world want peace so strongly that one day the governments are going to have to get out of their way and let them have it," end quote. His concern was manifested in the civilian nature of the American International Geophysical Year project, and also in the presentation of his dramatic Open Skies proposal in Geneva, Switzerland on 21 July 1955, a proposal that just within the last 10 years has become a reality. The proposal offered the Soviet Union and other countries reciprocation of a complete blueprint of our military establishments and a comprehensive and effective system of inspection and disarmament. You see, it's not new. Never was new. This extraordinary proposal, in addition to the announcement of a civilian satellite as a goal of the United States for the IGY, expressed two basic principles related to space activities that were ultimately to pervade many significant developments in international space law and several other international agreements of the space age. These principles were that the objectives of the activities of man in space should be scientific rather than military, and that such activities are for the benefit of all countries through cooperation and sharing of data, and the people of the world cheered, while in the background, in secret, a completely different and altogether hidden, even unto this day, space program was promulgated and carried out using hidden, top secret technology that would make Star Trek look like a stroll through Toys R Us. In fact, the International Astronautical Federation, which would soon establish the first International Institute of Space Law, sent a message to President Eisenhower expressing pleasure about the announcement that the scientific data obtained will be available to all nations as testimony of the peaceful application of rocket technology for the benefit of all mankind. Something that never panned out. Or even now, getting information out of the National Aeronautics and Space Administration is like pulling teeth from mammoths. Unfortunately, the Soviet IGY satellite announcement just one day after the announcement by the United States contained much less detail and fewer promises of international participation. Later, the Soviet Union rejected Eisenhower's Open Skies proposal with a counter-proposal. They would agree to an international space authority to conduct cooperative launches if the United States and all the countries of the world agreed to the total and outright abolition of all overseas military bases. So Eisenhower, forced to nurture the survival aspects of his divided sentiments and for reasons of national security, to forge the weakest link in his developing peaceful uses of space policy, despite his persistent public insistence on the compelling need to avoid the militarization of space. In private conversation, he emphasized to Deputy Secretary of Defense Donald Quarries that although information gathered in connection with the IGY would be made freely available, quote, many defense secrets will be jealously guarded, end quote. National defense was still to have top priority. Eisenhower indicated that, and I quote, to keep the satellite effort from interfering with the high priority work of ballistic missiles, it seemed mandatory to separate the programs, end quote. Since Stalin and Khrushchev both saw large ICBMs as the way to compete with American military supremacy, the real nature of the missile gap lay not simply in the chronological primacy of Sputnik or the boast of Khrushchev that the Soviet Union intended to turn out rockets like sausages, but rather in the size of the Soviet rockets and their ability to carry nuclear weapons. Because of the need to hedge United States bets on the militarization of space, the Army, our Wernher von Braun's Huntsville group, had also been assigned to develop a backup contribution to the American IGY satellite program and a completely hidden secret space program using a technology not yet imagined by the public. So it was that the easy perception of space as just another place to send military equipment and military personnel as the initial couriers of Earth's cultural values was relied upon and exploited by both of the world's superpowers. And this played the public back and forth, and they dug in their pockets for higher and higher taxes to fund the farce of the Cold War, while behind the scenes the United States and the Soviet Union participated at every level and were in space long before Apollo 11 landed upon the moon, if indeed it even did. Earth's cultural values was relied upon and exploited by both of the world's superpowers. Thus, the evolving pattern of future space-kind as Star Wars militarists found its roots in the Cold War politics emanating from Moscow and Washington long before President Ronald Reagan accepted the military importance of space as the high ground. Interesting indeed. Intellectually challenging is an understatement. For there was a space-kind Declaration of Independence completed by the foremost minds educated in space law, which none of you ever knew about and probably will not even understand. I know much more than I can ever tell you, and much more than I ever will. But I can steer you in the right directions for those who will listen, and those who will learn, and those who will dig. I can assure you, you will be rewarded.